The Gray Area, A Lifetime of High Strangeness by Bridget Anderson. We all feel like things are changing rapidly these days, perhaps faster than we can keep up. With all the new quantum fields of science and the breakthroughs in technology, we know, we feel it. We are on the cusp of a major shift in humanity's evolution. There is a shift in place recently to disclose these truths. More importantly, there is a shift in our awareness and ability to be able to accept these truths. It is indeed a very exciting time to be alive. At first, it will surely seem like a tough new reality that we're facing, one that shifts the solid ground we've come to depend on. There is an internal struggle going on as to whether we will be better off knowing these truths. Personally, though, as tough as it may be to accept, I would rather have my eyes wide open, looking at the tough reality, than to live life with the veil pulled over my eyes, not being able to know or participate in my reality. Especially if you're one of the ones who has awareness and some memory of being an active participant in that hard truth. Sometimes things have to get worse before they can get better. Many people have bits of the puzzle that are currently unfolding. Some knowingly hold these pieces, and others blindly hold these pieces. We are kept so segregated and compartmentalized that we never come together to compare notes and try to get a clearer view of the bigger picture. That is a shame, because in the end, we're all searching for the same truths. I don't claim to have all the answers. Trust me, no one does. I have managed to get a bit of a better perspective on things than most, though. Our current level of consciousness wouldn't allow us to grasp it all anyways. This is a very personalized experience, more so than you could possibly comprehend. My truths may not be your truths in the end. We are all here on personalized missions and different levels of spiritual evolution. My mission has been to gain a better understanding of what the big picture is and to deliver a coherent version of it to everyone for the benefit of all. Allow me to lend you my existence and perspective to shed some light on these matters. Here is my truth. Take from it what you will. Chapter 1. Where it all started. Where should I begin? The more I learn, the more I feel like these events in my life are somehow tied to this, or was a build-up to this. So I guess in order to be thorough, I should start from the very beginning. I was born in April of 1974. My parents were very young. My mom was 16 and my dad was 21 when she became pregnant with me. I only found out when I was a teenager by doing the math myself that yes, my parents did have a shotgun wedding, thanks to me. They went on to have my two younger brothers. We were all about 2 years apart in age. Although I don't know if they have any bearing on these matters, a few things I feel worth mentioning about my early childhood years. I also found out when I was a teenager that I was not breathing when I was born. The doctors put me on oxygen right away, but they made a mistake and fed me 100% pure oxygen for a time before the mistake was realized. My mom said that the doctor told her it would go one of two ways, that I would be very advanced or that I would be mentally retarded, and that she would know which it was very early on. My mom said that I rolled over on my own within the first couple of days. As nervous as she had been to hear what the doctor had to say, she knew from very early on that I was going to be advanced. I guess she was right. School was always a breeze for me. By second grade, I had some of my writing published in a magazine or a newspaper after winning some writing contest. The school approached my parents when I was in second grade and talked to them about having me skip the third grade and go straight to the fourth grade. They said that I was just not challenged enough. My parents decided not to move me up a grade, and my childhood went on fairly uneventful. I have 3 very vivid memories of my early years, before age 5, that have never left me. Although I can remember other things vaguely from these early years, these 3 things are as fresh and clear and detailed as if they happened yesterday. The first is the monster in my room that I feared at night. I saw this monster come out of my closet a few times and from under my bed. As much as I try to remember who or what this monster was, or what it looked like, its face always eludes me. I can't put my finger on it, but I know the feeling of fear and dread that it caused me. We only lived in that house for the first few years of my life. Once we moved to a new home, I never saw or got the eerie feeling of that monster again. Was it just a kid's imagination of a boogie monster? Was it a person sneaking into my room who was molesting me? I was 3 years old or less. Those details are very fuzzy. But I can still see the room clearly. The bright pink colors of the walls, the white dresser with the gold knobs, covered in my toys, and the dark closet door that I never wanted to go near after dark. The second early memory to stay with me was also from when we lived in that house. There was an old lady that lived across the street from us. Her backyard was like a magical playground. Not only were there a ton of different colored flowers and statues and outdoor decorative things, but she had this in-ground pool which she had turned into a pond for these big turtles she had. I remember spending a lot of time in her backyard and thinking her pool pond was the most magical thing I'd ever seen. I don't know if this woman used to babysit me or why I spent so much time over at her house when I was that young. Later in life, without consciously realizing the connection, I ended up with a couple of turtles as pets myself. I'm not so sure that this memory has any bearing on these matters, but for some reason, I attached a lot of significance to the experiences in this woman's backyard. I feel deep down that this woman or the experiences at her house shaped me or contributed to who I became in some big way. The last vivid early childhood memory is a bit more strange. It wasn't until I was 12 or 13 that I approached my mom one day and told her about these pictures I had in my head my whole life that would not go away and made no sense. She asked me to tell her about them. I told her that I can see a blonde-haired woman who has short cropped hair. She is wearing a navy blue dress with white polka dots and a pearl necklace. She is sleeping on a bed of white silk, but something is wrong. Something doesn't feel right. She doesn't look right. I look up at my mom and can instantly tell something is wrong. She is horrified. She says in a shocked and shaky voice, "I don't know how you could know that. We took you to your great-aunt's funeral against my better judgment because we couldn't find a sitter. You were only 2 or 3 years old. You were with me the whole time, and I didn't take you up to the casket, and made sure you were facing the other way when your dad went up to pay his respects. There is no way that you saw her in her casket, let alone that kind of detail. How could you know that? I can't explain it either, but I am seeing this woman close up, a foot away, looking right at her face and upper chest. That image is burned into my psyche forever and still pops up out of nowhere from time to time. Perhaps my unintended first vision of death was just that jarring, that it will never leave me. But my gut feeling is that there is some meaning or something else with this. So other than a few vivid memories that I can't seem to shake, and that feeling that they carry some significance to something, my early childhood was pretty normal, I guess. I don't think many people remember experiences so vividly from such a young age, or those memories stay so razor-focused for life as they have with me. But then again, who knows? I can only speak for myself. It was during this period of my life, from age 14 to 28, that I experienced the most high strangeness. This same time frame was also turbulent in many other normal but difficult ways that everyone goes through, like puberty, first loves, death of a loved one, etc. The culmination of so many intense experiences during this time was nothing short of remarkable that I survived it. Thankfully, it seemed to taper off after my 20s, both the high strangeness incidents and the normal life stuff. I would have not survived much longer at that pace. These things had taken such a toll on me and were happening so frequently that I was coming undone. Both my family and I began to question my mental well-being. I had a breakdown of sorts that landed me in the ER, having to be tranquilized. I was a mess over this shit, and I couldn't even tell anyone the half of it, or they would surely lock me up as certifiably insane. Wow, I look back now from over the hump and remember just how insane that time was. I am strangely proud of myself for actually physically surviving it all. I think not everyone would have. But I am getting way ahead of myself, as this is where my story really just begins. Around the time of puberty, things started getting really weird. The next 15 years of my life is hard to put into words. There is so much that happened, and each experience is part of the puzzle. But there is not enough time to document every single high strangeness event. I would have these vague memories, or were they dreams, like flashbacks, but flashbacks to events that I have no conscious knowledge of and seemed so crazy there was no way this could all be real, but something inside me knew that it was. November of 1989, I was 15 years old, and the Berlin Wall was set to come down in Germany. It was supposed to be the biggest party on the planet. Pink Floyd was going to perform a concert and laser light show. I just had to go. I begged my parents for weeks to let me go. They thought I was crazy. I even offered to let one of them come with me as a last-ditched effort. No go. They said I would just have to watch it on TV like everyone else. The date arrived and I was glued to our television. As the festivities began, my mom walked into the living room and said something to the effect of, "See, you can see the whole thing right here from the safety of our home." Her trite tone of voice triggered something in me. I felt this electric shock go through my body, and I said to her before I even realized what was coming out of my mouth, "I knew I shouldn't have picked you guys. I knew you would never understand." At that moment, those words left my mouth. I had this flashback of walking down this very bright lit corridor with someone, and there was raised platforms on either side of us. The platforms were about a foot or two off the ground, and there were what looked like real people, but I would later come to realize that they were holograms, so lifelike you could not distinguish them from real life. They were couples, a man and a woman. Some of them were sitting at dinner tables, talking and laughing. Some of them were standing next to a door or a counter and were arguing. Some were embracing and crying, and some of them were in a bed or on a couch having sex. It was the strangest thing, because as we walked down this brightly lit corridor, I was told to choose wisely, as this choice would play a huge role in the experience I would have. As we passed each couple, I could feel the energy signature of that couple. Each couple had a unique energy signature. About 3/4 of the way down this corridor, we came to this couple whose energy signature was off the charts. They were very young, and they were having sex. But it was more than that. It felt like they had just had a fight. The woman was crying or had recently been crying. But at the same time, they were having such passionate sex. The energy signature was unique and intense. It's the best way I can describe it. I stopped on the spot and said, "I choose them." The being said, "That is a bold choice, but may cause you some difficulties." I stood by my choice and refused to even finish walking the corridor. I wouldn't even look at other options. That's how sure I was. All of a sudden, I realized that it felt like space and time had just pulled into a vacuum, and then the sounds of my living room came back at full volume, and I was standing there looking at my mother, who was looking at me like, "What are you talking about? Choose us for what?" I was so overwhelmed and disoriented. I started crying and ran up to my room. My mom thought I had ran off crying, upset because they wouldn't let me fly to Germany at 15 years old. But really, I was scared and confused, and not at all sure what had just happened to me. But it shook me to the core. Although I had had strange flashbacks or dreams occasionally that I couldn't place, this was the first of the high strangeness events that happened in waking hours that others witnessed that I knew could not be just written off as a dream or something I saw on television. This was also the first of a lifetime of these little shocks that I would get sometimes when these things happened. Something was going on here. It was around this time that I started looking for answers. I first turned to religion. I was not brought up in a religious household and had never been to church except for weddings. I once asked my mom why they had never gone to church or taken us to church. She said that religion was a deeply personal thing that she would not force on us. She said that when we were old enough, we could seek out religion for ourselves if we wanted to. It seemed like just as good a place as any to start. So here I was, this 15 or 16-year-old typical teen on the one hand, living life just like any other teen, I guess. But from that moment on, there was this whole other secret side of my life that I knew I could not speak about to anyone. My day-to-day life was my exterior journey, but I was now choosing to embark on an interior journey as well. I had always been a huge reader. I read every night before bed. I couldn't fall asleep unless I had read at least a few pages. Sometimes a book would grab me and I would be up all night or spend the next day finishing the book. I was reading fantasy and typical teen literature, but suddenly my interest was in researching all the major religions of the world. What were their similarities and differences? Where was all the source material from? Most of the major religions I found very hard to relate to. First of all, they all seem to come from an individual man who claims to have been touched by God and given information. What made that man so special? Why him? How does he know it was really God and not something else? If God wanted us to know all these things, he could just make it so. Then there was the fact that they claim fantastic magical events occurred that seem to defy what we know as possible. These stories are passed down over thousands of years, which brings to mind the childhood game of telephone, where you whisper the message to the next person, and what you end up with is not at all what you started with. Then I am finding material that suggests these writings were selectively chosen, and some were not included. Started feeling to me like I was going to find more non-truths than anything else. My mom was a collector of antiques, and even had an antique shop for a while. She had boxes of old books all the time, as did both of my grandmas. They would let me pick from their books and borrow whatever I wanted. It was in one of these boxes that I found some old books on Buddhism. I had always been drawn to the Japanese culture. Growing up, if I saw an image or something on TV, it always spoke to me, felt comfortable to me. I was fascinated with everything Japanese and had no idea why. When I found the books on Buddhism, it all made sense then. I knew then this was my calling. I was meant to live my life in Japan. I found the first solid ground of my entire life in the teachings of those books. It was the only major religion, in my opinion, that wasn't trying to tell me what to believe, to tell me the answers. Buddhism says, let me teach you how to find those answers for yourself. And that's exactly what I did. The other major thing with me in Buddhism is that I developed these 3 knots on my head near my temple when I was around 14. The doctor said they were just calcium deposits, that many people have them. The doctor said that I should have them checked every so often to make sure that they were only growing outward from my skull and not inward, which could put pressure on the brain. They never hurt, but they were hard as a rock, just 3 pebble-sized knots on my temple. I found in the Buddhism books information about bodhisattvas. A bodhisattva is one who has completed their enlightenment, but defers entry into nirvana and chooses to keep coming back over and over in order to help others reach it as well. One of the key physical traits of a bodhisattva is 3 knots on the head. As my eyes passed over the words, once again, I have that electric shock feeling and slowly raise my hand to the bumps on my head. I knew at that moment I'd gotten my first answer. It lit a fire in me. Of course, with every answer, it also reveals 20 new questions. Who was it that said, "The smartest man is he who realizes he knows nothing"? I knew in my soul that it was my destiny to seek these truths and bring them to light. So here I am, this typical teenage girl, living a typical teenage life, but who is also privately learning ancient meditation techniques, chanting, and breathing exercises. I told everyone from that time on I was going to live in Japan after college. While researching colleges, I came across this program, Semester at Sea. It was hosted by a different university each year. It was a ship that had been turned into a floating university. They chose 500 college students from around the world, put them on a ship where they took classes while sailing around the planet, stopping at 10 different countries for a few days to a week. I decided right then I was going to participate in this program. I was accepted into my first choice of colleges and was thrilled to move out of the state and have the freedoms to follow my own path. It was as if my life was finally beginning. I think of the strength, energy, and sheer determination I had back then. It felt so good to be able to create my own future in the physical world, in a way that supports this interior journey as well. It was nice to have those 2 lives that I had kept separate merge into one concrete life plan that encompasses both. The plan was to learn all I could about Japan, anything and everything. I took intensive language courses of reading, writing, and speaking. I took supplemental conversation courses. I think I took every course they offered on Japan, from religion to language to culture and economics. I had a Japanese roommate one year, joined extracurricular groups and events, anything and everything. I would do the semester at sea program my junior year, finish college, and move to Japan. I somehow knew the answers that I sought would be found there. My first semester went okay, but I had been seeing this guy from back home who had come up to visit, and I found myself pregnant in late October, early November. To make matters worse, my parents informed me that they were going through some major financial difficulties and would no longer be able to pay my expensive private university tuition. I was devastated. I had failed right out of the gate. How can I let this happen? My life would be ruined. This child's life would be ruined, being born to an unwed college dropout. I was told at the clinic that I would need to make a decision in the next 60 days how I wanted to handle the pregnancy. Abortion, adoption, or ruin both of our lives. Between my parents' bombshell that I would not be returning to college and now this, how did my life go from being lined up perfectly to being over in less than 90 days? I finished that first semester by putting everything out of my mind and pretending it didn't exist, so I could keep it together long enough to finish my courses. I moved back home on Christmas break and cried myself to sleep every night, having no idea what to do. I didn't feel like I could live with any of the options. By Christmas Eve, I knew I was running out of time. I was 2 months pregnant and would have to tell my parents and face this. I remember laying there sobbing quietly in my pillow. I started thinking about Christmas, that it was God's son's birthday. I was praying for the first time in my life. I begged him to take this back and give me a second chance. I was starting to drift off to sleep, still crying and praying, when I remember a very bright light shining in front of my bedroom window. What could be that bright shining in a second-story window? What about the tree? Why is there no shadow from the branches like usual? The next thing I know, I sit straight up in my bed and take this huge deep breath, like I had been holding my breath or something. Then I'm hit with this pain I had never experienced before. Being older and having many miscarriages as well as one child, I know this pain was contractions. But at 19 years old and never having been pregnant, I did not know what was happening to me. I get out of my bed and I'm about to go get my mom and come clean with her. I need help. Something's wrong. As I'm doubled over in pain, trying to make it across the room, I hear my parents downstairs wrapping Christmas presents and laughing. That's right. It's Christmas Eve. I stop at the end of my bed and I'm hit with the most intense pain yet. Wetness gushes out all over my pajama pants. I think I've peed my pants until I look down and see all the blood. It's running down my leg, dripping onto my pastel carpet. I grab a pile of dirty clothes from the floor and fall to my knees. I want to scream, but I'm so scared and paralyzed with the pain, I can't move. I just lay there on my knees, doubled over, bleeding heavily, for what seemed like hours. I heard my parents finish up and go to bed. After a while, the bleeding and the pain eased a little. I cleaned myself up as best I could, put a pad on, hid the pajamas, underwear, dirty clothes I'd bled all over, put something over the stain on my carpet, and I crawled into bed. I laid there in a ball, shaking until I fell asleep or passed out. The next thing I know, my parents are waking me up to open Christmas presents. I faked my way through it, took some medicine, and went back to bed. I knew that I was no longer pregnant, and that God had not only heard my prayer, but granted it. He had taken it back and given me that second chance. I felt blessed and promised him that I would not waste this gift he had given me. My mom had contacted the admissions office at my college and explained the situation to them. Long story short, I was back in my private university the next academic year on scholarships and financial aid. I worked 3 part-time jobs one year while going to college full-time with difficult schedules. I did whatever it took to make my dreams come true. I never forgot how easily one mistake can derail your entire life. Focused and disciplined would be an understatement. I was on a mission. The fall semester of 1994 was the other infamous episode that forever is burned into my psyche. It was finals week. My roommate and I were cramming for our finals. I had my big Japanese language final at 8 a.m. the next morning. I would not be advanced to the next level of the course if I didn't score high enough on this final. I would be forced to repeat this class again next semester. I had been struggling this semester and my grade was low enough that I had to do well on this final. I didn't think I would do well. I studied day and night, but I just couldn't pound it all into my memory quick enough. The night before the exam, I was freaking out. I was taking caffeine pills and drinking coffee and had no plans of sleeping. I needed every minute up to the test. My roommate had a few friends over and they were partying downstairs in the living room. I had my headphones on and I was listening to music as I studied to block out the noise from downstairs. It was late, probably 2 or 3 in the morning. I'd smoked all my cigarettes but one. I had saved that last one for in the morning. Tomorrow was not the day to start without a cigarette, so I had to go the rest of the night without. I would have my one cigarette on the way to my exam and go get a pack after the test. I was wearing my favorite old pajamas that I'd had since I was 12. A few more hours to cram before the test. I have no memory of how this happened or any feeling at the time. One minute I was sitting on the end of my bed studying, and the next moment I was floating, hovering up in the corner of my bedroom. I am looking at my body sitting on the end of the bed, motionless. I will my body to look up and look into my own eyes. I don't think I would ever be able to put into words what that did to me. How can I prove this was real and not a dream? The cigarette. I will my body to smoke the cigarette, the last one that I was saving before my test. But then I think that still won't convince me because I could have just woken up half asleep and smoked it without consciously realizing I needed to save it. Then I had a plan. Smoke it halfway. Put the cigarette out halfway, and if you wake up to a whole cigarette or no cigarette, you'll know you're just crazy. But if you wake up to half a cigarette, you'll know that this really happened. I watched myself smoke the cigarette. It was the strangest feeling, hovering there outside my body, but still being able to control my body like I was in it. It was strange not needing oxygen, and that whole involuntary thing just evaporated. I floated there and watched myself put the cigarette out halfway. And then I thought, okay, what now? How do I get back into my body? The next memory I have is of being in a dark place, and a being that I can't see or feel, but just hear telepathically, says to me, "Yours is going to be a difficult one." And I reply, "Even the worst life is better than no life." And with that, I turn and swim back in the direction I came from. I had the alarm set for 7:03 to make it to my 8 a.m. test, but I never turned the alarm on because I never went to bed. Nonetheless, I woke up at 7:03, completely naked. I had no thoughts in my head whatsoever. I woke up refreshed, energized, and ready to take my test. I showered, dressed, and went to my test, and somehow aced it. As much as I had been struggling in that course, I knew without a doubt I had scored an A on that test. I just knew the answers. I don't know how. I didn't know them yesterday, but this morning, when I needed them, they were there. I was having a great day. I was on top of the world. I stopped and got a pack of cigarettes and headed home for lunch. When I got home, my roommate was upstairs in her room. She asked me how the test went. I said great and went into my room. I was going to sit on the bed and have a cigarette when I noticed my nightgown laying bunched up on the floor next to my bed. Just as my roommate came to my doorway to gab, I picked up the nightgown to throw it in the dirty clothes. When I grabbed the nightgown, I got an electric shock and suddenly remembered every detail of what had happened the night before. The out-of-body experience and them letting me come back. I immediately thought of the cigarette and I turned to look at my ashtray that was sitting by the bed. There was the half-smoked cigarette in the exact position I watched myself put it in. That's when the bottom dropped out from under me. Everything started spinning. The back of my head got very fuzzy and I felt like I was going to pass out. I slid down onto my bed and tried to get a hold of myself. My roommate was speaking when I grabbed the nightgown off the floor, and she would later say that she watched the color drain from my face and a blank stare came over my eyes, that I went completely white and she thought that I was going to pass out or die. The next time I looked at her face, she was crying and she looked very scared and said I needed to go talk to someone, that I was scaring her. I didn't go talk to anyone, but I did become interested and started researching out-of-body experiences. In the fall of the next year, 1995, I boarded the ship with a few $100s cash, about 15 credit cards, and began the Semester at Sea program. I knew that I would be putting myself in a financial hole over this, but it was a once-in-a-lifetime experience that I was not about to miss out on. Japan was our first stop.